New satellite photos show a buildup of Russian troops and equipment, which are typically stationed in other parts of the country. Politico obtaining satellite images that reportedly confirm the presence of tanks and artillery along the border with Ukraine and Belarus. Ever since Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, Ukraine is fearful another escalation could take place against its territories. And tensions are again on the rise between Russia and Ukraine, who is joining other Baltic countries in trying to obtain NATO membership. It was a major conversation last month when Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin traveled to Georgia, Romania, and Ukraine, publicly condemning Russia's encroachment on those countries.
So we again call on Russia to end its occupation of Crimea, to stop perpetuating the war in eastern Ukraine, to end its destabilizing activities in the Black Sea and along Ukraine's borders.
Ukraine's defense minister, responding to the reports, says the country hasn't recorded any suspicious increase of forces at its border. Meanwhile, the Pentagon says it's aware of reports of unusual activity taking place in the region without going into details. Those same reports say the U.S. and Europe are keeping a close eye on any movements.
Thank you very much, Alex. Joining us now to discuss is Christian Witton, a former senior advisor in the Trump and the Bush administrations. Christian, thank you very much for joining us. You know, the Ukraine Defense Ministry itself originally denied the presence of the Russian troops, but now they say about 90,000 Russian troops are stationed near the border. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the Ukrainians either didn't have the correct intelligence as to what was transpiring or chose not to reveal that to the public if they did possess that information. You know, they're not a member of NATO, but we do at times share intelligence with them, so it wouldn't be surprising that they would possess the sort of actual, close to real-time intelligence as to what's going on. But, you know, what I think Putin is doing, this is actually somewhat similar to what he did earlier in the year, which is to flex his muscle, probably without the intention of using additional military force in Ukraine, but to send a signal to Ukraine and also to Washington. You know, President Biden was just in Glasgow for the COP26, and even though this military move would have had to have been planned in advance, Biden again continuing to tweak Vladimir Putin, this time throwing him some shade for not showing up in person at the climate change confab. So probably Russia just flexing its arms just to remind people that it can.
So we throw shade at them not showing up at the climate conference, and so they send 90,000 troops to the border with Ukraine.
What?
Right, it would be a little bit of an odd response.
Yeah.
You know, some people think that you send military troops to a border 5 times. Nothing happens. 6th time, you go in. So you can't let your guard down if you're Ukraine or the United States, if we care enough about Ukraine to help them. Why would Russia want Ukraine? They already have the port. They already went and essentially took it. So why would they want the rest of Ukraine?
Right. Well, and before I answer that, you are correct that you should be concerned. The Soviet plan for invading Western Europe and NATO was to disguise it as a drill. So you're always worried about Russian military drills. You know, I don't want to be an apologist for the Russians, but from their point of view, when the Cold War ended, when the wall came down, they thought they had an agreement that NATO wouldn't move farther to the east. And in fact, we moved it right up to their borders in the Baltics. It's one thing to add countries like Poland, where we have a lot of ethnic overlap, a lot of Polish Americans, a lot of interest. Poland was ground zero for the beginning of World War II, but to extend things further, if Russia thought that Ukraine was going to become a part of NATO, which it wants to be, or that Georgia was going to become a part of NATO, Russia also thought that Crimea would be used as a Western base, potentially to deny it really any sort of usable access to the Black Sea. Again, I don't agree with all these Russian analyses, but that is what Russia thought. And so by taking small parts of Ukraine and Georgia, you can effectively make it impossible for them to join NATO and send a signal to the West that you are very unhappy.
Christian, switching gears to China, I want to get your take on this report by the Pentagon that it says China could have as many as 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. The news comes after China, of course, recently tested that hypersonic missile. And then also to General Milley's comments recently, I think just the other day, predicting that China will not invade Taiwan within the next 2 years.
just like the Taliban would not take Kabul.
Exactly.
Milley doesn't know. The government doesn't know. We have, I think, extremely little access to the thinking of Xi Jinping, the Chinese dictator. What he has done with the nuclear arsenal is depressing because China always had a fairly modest strategic nuclear capability, the ability to launch ICBMs, deploy them around the world at a short minute's notice. They had a much lower capability, we thought, than we did or that the Russians did. And it seems like China is going for parity. That does pose a problem for us. Our nuclear arsenal, the government says it's reliable. It says it's good. We haven't tested a nuclear weapon since 1991 when George H.W. Bush sort of put in place a voluntary moratorium. We are not prohibited from treaty by testing those. There's some talk of a new nuclear warhead for new submarine-launched missiles from the United States, and I think it would be insane to deploy that without testing it. It's just another symbol, I think, that China wants to have a global military with global reach.
Mutually assured destruction worked with the Soviet Union. Can we be assured that it would work with China? Because just because they may have 1,000 warheads, we may have thousands more than that. However, they are developing technology even to get around our defense systems.
You always worry about a mistake. You think that sort of the classic ways you think, if you think of the movie War Games the day after, a full-blown nuclear exchange would lead to mutually assured destruction, a decapitation attempt where we try and blow up Moscow, where they try and take out Washington in order to catch us with our pants down. You could see how that, even if the National Command Authority was damaged, nonetheless, how we could respond and retaliate. But you do worry about regional contingencies with Taiwan, or as you suggest, if they have something that suggests they could get around our very limited ballistic missile defenses, then it creates this temptation. So it's not something we want really to rely upon. We'd like to have good missile defenses, and ideally, one day some arms control treaties. I'm skeptical of those in general, but I still think we should give it a shot from time to time.
Yeah, I worry about China, Russia, and Iran all working together. Christian, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.